Hello. I can't hear you, Dan. I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
I feel like it's a T-Mobile commercial.
Yeah.
Thanks for that. Sorry, I thought you were here already. I will just live here in the sideline. And hello to you. My name is Andrea. How are you?
I'm fine. My
Good,
name's
good, good.
Pam.
Hi,
Hi,
Pam.
Pam.
And
So
this
just-
time Dan gets to see me because last time we talked, I couldn't get the camera to work on it.
Well, I'm glad you were able to get it to work because it certainly makes one-on-one
Much better.
conversations
Yeah.
a lot better. So
Much better.
Well, I'm still setting stuff up, so just we'll get started. I'll probably wait a minute or two past the 1 o'clock hour.
Yeah.
To officially get started, but should see people getting in soon.
Dan, is there anything useful that I can do for you in this session, or do you want me to just sit tight?
Oh, you can take over. I'll just leave.
Yeah, sure. We may
We're
not cover
supposed
what
to
you'd
be
like to have
adaptable.
covered.
You're gonna offer. No, I think I'm good for now. Okay.
You want me to be? Oh, well, Pam is here. I was going to say, do you want me to be co-host? But no, you've got
Yeah,
Pam.
we'd have to be three toast.
No,
I'm gonna
that just
defer
creates
to the other
confusion.
two.
Andrea, actually, since you are here, you can maybe help me keep an eye on the chat. And by
Sure.
the way, are you all seeing the transcript?
Yes,
Okay,
I'm not seeing
cool.
it actually, but I think that's because I didn't add the. Hold on, let me just try it. Yep, I just added the subtitle and it's on.
Okay, because we do
Okay.
have one of our colleagues is deaf, so he will have an interpreter, but I thought I'd have this as an option as well. And
You know what, Dan? I haven't introduced myself to those who are newly accepted to Vale and Coil.
Yep.
Maybe by the end of the session, you could just let them know that I'm going to reach out to them directly. Okay, cool.
Yeah,
Thanks.
yeah. In fact, I'm gonna put a note here so I don't forget. Okay.
Dan, is there an easier way to get to the bright space screen for this? Because the only way I can get in is when I go to your email and click on that link.
So the URL that I sent you to get
Yeah.
from yeah, so you should be able to when you log into Brightspace, you'll see
Right.
my courses list. And you may
Right.
have to go down to the very bottom and click on show all, or I'm not sure what the
They
exact
view
word
all
is.
courses.
Yes.
Okay,
then-
the only thing I see are my classes that I'm teaching this semester.
You're gonna have to scroll through and it'll probably be very, very bottom. But when you do find it, you'll want to pin it.
Aha,
So
okay,
there's a little pin icon up in the top right corner.
yep,
And then if you click on that, it'll pin it to your screen. And then when you log in, it'll be among the first, I don't know how many it shows,
okay,
like
okay,
15
great.
or whatever.
Yeah, I found it, thanks.
Hi, Dustin, is it? You don't have to respond, but I just wanted to, you can nod or whatever. I just wanted to make sure that you're going to be getting the PowerPoints for workshops ahead of time, hopefully, assuming you're going to be the one working with Mikey consistently.
Today, I don't know about consistently.
Okay. Well, at the very least, I'm going to be sending the PowerPoints to him a lot earlier than I did today. But then hopefully you or whoever's interpreting will have access to that ahead of time.
Okay.
And I think Mikey's logging in now. Hi, Mikey. Let me make sure. Over here.
Clarifying.
Okay, just fair warning to everybody. I am recording this session, so hopefully everyone has access to that. After the meeting, I'll be posting it to Brightspace under the reflection section. So you'll have access to this recording as well. Bear with me for just 1 second. Okay, so this is workshop 1 for IPG. My name is Dan Jones. I believe I've met with nearly every single one of you, so hopefully I'm a familiar face at this point. Sorry, I got things popping up on my window screen here. I just want to go over what the agenda is for today to get us started. We're going to do a little bit of video setup. This is particularly useful for those who are doing virtual instruction, virtual exchange, but I think it may also just be generally beneficial for everyone, even if it's just here in IPG. Then we're going to start with our first intercultural learning activity, which is the Voices from the Past handout. So if you don't have that handy, you could go ahead and grab that and have that nearby. We're going to do a breakout session, and this will kind of be our routine in each of these workshops. We'll start off with an intercultural learning activity, going into breakout rooms to discuss, and then we'll come back as a larger group. I'll discuss that a little bit more as we get to that. Then we're going to get into our overview of IPG, all the things required, and this is kind of going to be a repeat of some of the conversations we've already been having. I'll talk about the assessment trials and where we are with that. We'll spend a little bit of time talking about some study abroad logistics, also both in person and virtual. And then, and I should have removed this, there's not a Q&A with study abroad this time. Our representative from study abroad actually couldn't make it today. So I'm going to do my best to answer any questions you might have. And then we'll get to next steps, talking about the next workshops going forward. So video setup. So there's a couple things that I want to talk about, just some basic setup of your video when you're in a virtual space. And one of the things we're going to talk about, especially in the virtual track of IPG, we'll be focusing a lot about addressing the digital divide. Anytime that you can set the visual frame of your video to be similar to everyone else's, it's a little easier on our eyes. Everyone's familiar with Zoom fatigue. So little tweaks to this can make the experience for everyone else a little bit easier on our brains because we are sharing a virtual space instead of an actual physical space. So a couple things to address, as I mentioned, is the framing. So I'm actually going to adjust mine to give you an idea. Number one, we all want to kind of fill the same amount of space in the frame. We want to be the same distance away from our camera as far as our head size. That helps, but also physical space above our heads. We don't want to be cut off. So you can use your fist to kind of help with that as well, what that distance is. And then lighting is the other thing. So, well, and before I get to lighting, excuse me. So the other part of framing is it's always a good idea whenever possible. And keep in mind, this has a lot to do with what's possible, what's not possible in your physical space. But anything that you can use to limit distractions behind you, but also still have some depth of space. So my background is blurred, and that can be helpful in some situations, but also you might still be able to tell through this visual that I am in a 3D space. There's a corner in the background. Corners definitely help, but I realize that some of us don't have options and we just have a flat wall. But I do want you to be aware of that option to help make your video look a little bit more like we're actually in a physical 3D space. Any of those visual cues can help. These are all things that our brains do subconsciously as they look for these kind of indicators. And when things are very flat, like just a flat wall, then it really does read as only 2D. So any little thing we can do can kind of alleviate some of that stress on our brains. The lighting aspect, it's recommended that you try to have a light that is somewhat diffused and not directly in front of you, but slightly off to the side. And you'll see that where I have shadow on the side, but not as much on this side. So these are very technical things about setting up your physical space, but just giving a few minutes of consideration to this ahead of a meeting and making some micro adjustments once you're in, comparing your image to the others as far as size is concerned, it really can make a huge difference on how exhausted we feel at the end of one of these Zoom meetings. And keeping in mind for IPG, we are meeting for an hour and 30 minutes. Aside from that, I've got up here video etiquette. So certainly, I think this is something everybody's much more familiar with now than in years past. Muting when you're not speaking is certainly a good idea. That way, if there is any background noise or if you have to move stuff around, people aren't hearing shuffling papers and whatnot. And also muting your video. There may be times when that's also necessary. Certainly, if you need to get up and do something, that's kind of become part of our general politeness while we're online. But we're going to also talk about strategic use of muting the video as well. And that's this next part, talking about the fishbowl. So I'm not sure, I think everybody has different levels of experience with this. So some of you may have already heard about the fishbowl technique, some may have not. So certainly when we have a group as large as this, and we begin to have discussions, it's hard to feel like you're in an intimate setting where you're speaking to someone one-on-one when you've got, 20 different little squares up on the screen. It's kind of like trying to talk to the Brady Bunch. But the fishbowl technique is a way to make those conversations a little more intimate. And we'll be using this after we come out of our breakout session. I'm going to ask for some volunteers, or I may select some volunteers. Generally, what we do is, rather than having everyone be present in the conversation visually, and this is there, I want to distinguish that visually versus audio. We'll still be able to participate, but visually, what we're going to do is have volunteers or people representing groups that are going to be reporting back. And instead of having 20, 25 people, we'll have 5, 6 people visually on the screen. And for us watching that, participating in the conversation, even if we're not the speaker, the person who's visible, it feels a little bit more intimate. It feels more like a conversation between a small group, which again is less taxing on our brains over the span of time and longer conversations. So during this, I'll have a few representatives who will keep their videos on, and everyone else will turn their videos off. And then there's a setting where you can hide any video that is not showing someone. So when someone's video is muted, you can hide those, and then you only see the squares for the people that have their videos on, their camera on. So this is the fishbowl. So everyone who has their cameras off are sort of outside the fishbowl, watching the small group of people who are in the fishbowl, so to speak. But again, I do want to reiterate in this practice that does not eliminate anyone else's opportunity or ability to contribute to or participate in the conversation. It's rather we have 5 or so people who are, kind of designated to be reporting for their group, but that doesn't prevent anyone from jumping in or chiming in. I also want to point to the chat as well. I'm going to have that open, and thankfully I also have Andrea here, my colleague, is going to be monitoring that for me as well. So I do want you to be aware of that. I'll kind of coach us through this first session with the fishbowl, but we'll be using it repeatedly, again, because it does facilitate conversations and makes it a little easier on all of us. So with that, I do want to kind of pause, and if anyone has any questions, please feel free to ask as I move on to the next thing. Okay, so we're going to get into the icebreaker voices from the past. So as I mentioned, if you don't have this worksheet, go ahead and get it out, because we're going to go into breakout rooms, and you'll speak with your small group, sharing what you put in your handout. So we're going to share for about 10 minutes. I think I'm going to put us in groups of 3. And of course, I have to pull up breakout rooms because it hid it from me the minute I start sharing. I'd hide, there it is. Okay. And I need to see, we've got about 24 participants. So I think I want to do 7 breakouts. Okay. So we're going to share answers and discuss what they review when we come back. You're going to share with each other, and then we're going to come back and report back on these. So basically what we're looking for is, what do these pieces of information mean to you? And we're going to share that with each other, and then we're going to kind of parse out what else they mean to everyone else. So for this, and I posted these questions in Brightspace. So one thing I do want to be aware of is, when we go into the breakout rooms, you won't have access to my PowerPoint anymore. So if you want to pull up Brightspace and pull up that Meet section, those questions are included in there for the breakout room. But what we want to talk about is, what does the message from your influential person mean to you? How was it formative to you? How did it maybe help you develop as a person? And what do these pieces of information say about us culturally? And then finally, we're also going to talk about how something like this might be beneficial to our students. So you're going to see the breakout room pop up here in a minute, and you'll just accept it and go in. I do want to acknowledge that I may have to do some shuffling around to make sure that the right people get in the right groups, of course. So please be patient with me, and then you'll get a countdown at the end telling you it'll be time to wrap it up, and then you'll come back to the full group. So it's 1:13. I'm going to shoot for 1:24 to bring everybody back, just to give everybody kind of a frame of reference for that. So let me go ahead and do this. And I want to make sure that I get, bear with me for just a second, because I do have to move some people around. Oh, there you go. Okay. Move to room 1. Okay, I think we're ready. Oh, nope. Mikey's down here. He's in 7. Okay. Back on. Welcome back, everyone. Thanks for bearing with some of the technological issues that plague us from time to time. Hopefully everyone had an opportunity to share their responses, introduce themselves, get to know each other kind of on a small scale. So what we're going to do now is, I can pull back I'm just going to randomly ask a few of you, one from each group, to keep your video on and be inside the fishbowl. And then everyone else, I'll have turn off your video. So if I could have Andrea Langrish, Addison, Brian, Derek, Teresa, Erica, and Andrew. If I could have you all meet in the fishbowl, and everyone else, you'll turn your video off. And if you go to the top right corner of Zoom, there is a view button. And well, actually, it's not going to be there, is it? Apologies. It's going to be, I think, in the video.
Video settings.
Video settings. Thank you. So I always get confused between Zoom and Teams. If you go to video settings, under video, there should be a hide non-video participants. And if you check that box, it should make all the empty boxes disappear. So can I get a thumbs up when my video participants have done that and are all ready to go?
Well, can you, please, sorry for being slow. Where did you say it is?
If you go to the bottom left,
Uh-huh.
you have the mute for your microphone and then stop video for your video. If you click on the up arrow and go to video settings, there will be a pop-up.
Okay.
In that pop-up, if you scroll down, the second to last in the second kind of section, there's a divider. I want to say 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, the fourth one down says hide non-video participants. If you click that checkbox.
Okay.
And that should make all of the other individuals whose videos are off disappear. So you just see the 10 of us who are currently visible.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Yeah, and I am going to, as I said, I'm going to try and keep an eye on the chat as well, but I have Andrea here helping me. So Andrea, feel free to jump in if somebody does share something and I don't catch it. So what we're going to do now in this fishbowl is have a conversation about the Voices from the Past activity. So the first question is, I'd like to hear from each of you. What does the message from your influential person mean to you? So I'm just going to pick at random. Addison, share your influential message and what does that message mean to you?
Yeah, so mine is something that my dad would tell me all the time, usually when I was growing up and younger and going through a rough time. And so it's actually a quote that a lot of people have probably heard before. It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. So I was trying to explain to the group, I grew up on a small farm, and like adaptability and resilience and characteristics like that were pretty important, or is a big lesson to me when I was younger, and it still has stuck with me quite a bit today. And it meant a lot to me when I was younger, and it still does now, because whenever I'm going through a tough situation or I just need like assistance with anything, I just like hear his voice like telling me that quote for the first time when I was little, and just going over the life lesson that it doesn't matter like what happened to you or what you're going through, but my reaction to that and what I do next is the important thing. I have there's a second quote that's kind of related to that, and they all tie together. But I do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu as a hobby, and my coach always says pressure makes diamonds. And I think that they're related in terms of resilience and finding yourself in a tricky or a difficult situation, and kind of persevering or finding a way to push through that. So yeah, did I answer your question, Dan?
Yeah, thank you very much
Yep.
for that. And before you mute your mic, I apologize. I'm a little rusty with these meetings. It's been since last year since I've done IPG. We only do them in the fall. But Addison, could you just real briefly introduce yourself and tell everybody what department you're coming from?
Yeah, so I'm Addison Sheldon, and I'm the Director of Global Engagement in the vet school at Purdue. So I'm the international study abroad guy over here. So I help our students go abroad. Whenever international visitors come in, I help them too. So that's pretty much what I do. So, and I'm here. I mean, it's obviously beneficial for me because I help our faculty who lead programs. But I am also trying to plan a program that will hopefully run for the first time in Korea, South Korea, in summer 2024, like in May. So,
all right, thanks a lot. So that the key message that you got both from your father and from your jiu-jitsu instructor, really great quotes. Thanks for sharing those. And I want to get to somebody else, and we're going to unpack this a little bit. So Derek, can I call on you next? Again, just introduce yourself real briefly and where you're coming to us from, and then your key message.
Hello, my name is Derek Larson. I teach animation in CGT, computer graphics technology. I thought when I read that, I thought about two people in particular. As an undergrad, I had two professors who were nearing retirement and sort of, gave me a lot of guidance. One in particular helped submit my work to an opportunity to go to France and live with a family in Brittany for the summer. And it changed me and my trajectory and my outlook. And he stressed the importance of travel. So I stayed on topic with this one. And I'm, trying to offer for the first time a course called Anime in Japan, where we'll go to Tokyo and Kyoto and visit some animation studios and some cultural heritage sites. And I think that first summer abroad for me was key in my development, and it's sort of why I want to build this course.
Okay, thank you very much. As we go through these, I'm going to be adding in the next follow-up question. So I'm going to go to Brian next. Brian, if you could introduce yourself and then your key message, but I'd also like to hear a little follow-up of how was this formative to you?
Sure. Yeah, so I'm Brian Oberholzer. I'm a professor in the Department of Pharmacy Practice in the College of Pharmacy. I'm going to Spain for a month to work with the university there. And one of the things we're going to do is set up an exchange program with our graduate students, or attempt to. The message that I wrote down, since it didn't say verbal message, I couldn't think of necessarily a verbal message that stuck out. So I wrote that really the message in my life hasn't been, it's been through a lot of people. So I put those leaders and influencers have led by examples of grace, humor, and empathy during difficult situations. And I wasn't trying to cheat by not just putting down one specific example, but really I could think of many of those. And I felt almost of people that have handled themselves in ways which I have admired, something I've always not been very good at in certain difficult situations. So that's one thing I try to live by with that message. So the way it's been formative to me, I think it's somewhat self-explanatory. I believe that I really admire certain people in my life that have been able to hand themselves in such a way, and I almost try to emulate that. And when I find myself in certain situations that are difficult for me to be in, so hope that was specific enough for you.
Thank you very much, Brian. Appreciate it. Andrea, same question. Introduce yourself briefly, and then your key message and how it was formative to you.
I'm Andrea Langrish, the Managing Director for the Center for C-SPAN Scholarship Engagement. We run a 2-week study week course to Washington, D.C., and that's why I'm here. So the message that stuck with me was work hard and treat people the way you want to be treated, right? That came from my mother and my grandmother. When I say my grandmother, I mean my father's mother, because my mom's mom passed away before I was born. And my mom just passed away last year, so kind of sticks to me. Kind of the whole thing really impacts me or is very formative for me, because growing up, my dad did not have much of anything. They were quite poor. And so my grandmother very much had to make do with whatever was on hand, whatever little resources they had. And they did live in public housing for several years. So you had to learn how to get along with your neighbors. And we've seen, you know, how poverty can impact communities. And that definitely was something that impacted my grandmother, my grandfather, obviously my dad and his siblings. And my mom, with her influence on me, she was the daughter of a woman who was a musician, who would play around town at churches and other events, but she also played at the local bars, which, you know, for the 1940s and 50s was kind of seedy. And they lived in a very small town. And she would bring home guests, usually it was women, that she had met over time from the minority communities in the area, which mostly were African-American families. And she would invite them over. Well, being in this small rural white community, people were just aghast. How dare she? And I remember my mom telling me the stories and how my grandmother just was very graceful with this and said, you know, I work hard, they work hard, and I just want people to treat me the way, or want to treat them the way that I want to be treated. And I want somebody to invite me to their house. I want somebody to spend time with me. And I know it sounds super cliche, but that literally is one of the biggest influences that I had growing up. And it's a message that I carry forward with how I teach and how I interact with my students.
Thank you, Andrea. That's really, really helpful to hear these background stories. They do help a lot. And, you know, cliches exist for a reason, right? They are a shorthand for all of us because they are very useful. So thank you for sharing that. Teresa? Could you introduce yourself and then your key message?
Hi, everyone. My name is Teresa Carvajal. Some people call me Tere, so whatever works for you. I'm a faculty member in the Agriculture and Biological Engineering. The most influential message that I have is, again, it's kind of twofold in terms of personal life. Similar to Addison, my grandma used to say the same, not what happens, is how you react to it. And my mom says that we live in the present is a gift, and you guys have heard this. I mean, I heard it from her at a very young age, and I keep hearing it like very often in whatever support groups I am or not. But it's like the present is a gift, the past is gone, and the future is not coming here. So just concentrate in the present, and you will do good things to you and to others, because if you are good, you can expand it to the rest. And that has been for my personal life. In terms of let's say, of my career, I heard this often from one of my colleagues in the College of Pharmacy, by the way, in IPPH, in where he, Professor Pinal, he says that students have to be involved in activities to connect the dots with whatever they're doing. Is not to give them homework just for the sake of giving them homework and keep them busy. Just do something, or if they need homework, yes, but to reinforce, but connecting the dots. They need imagination, they need to develop the creativity, they need to wonder. And how they wonder is by being out there. And that's why I think of being out there, we can go to, and as some of you were saying, that makes a difference when you go outside of your of your level of comfort. I mean, I'm originally from Mexico, and then coming here, it was like, wow, it was a different world. And then once you are here, I worked before in industry before coming to academia, so everything keeps expanding. And I think it is true when you open, when you expand your horizon, you become more creative, you start wondering about things, you start comparing things and evaluating more things that can help you in your personal growth, or show others how can, if it works, of course, is no one size fits all, but if it works for some of them, how they can increase their horizons and feel more comfortable and being a better person professionally and personally. Thank you for letting me share with you guys.
Thank you, Tara. Thank you. Okay, and I'm starting to detect a little bit of a theme through some of these. Next, I'd like to go to Andrew. If you could introduce yourself and share your key message and how it's formative to you.
Sure. Thanks, Dan. I'm Andrew Brightman. I'm faculty in biomedical engineering. I'm planning for next May study abroad exploring healthcare innovations in the Netherlands. I grew up in a small rural community and in a community of folks who worked with their hands, carpenters and laborers. And my formative statement that I recall came quickly to me, came from my uncle. And it was when I was 8 or 9 and I had joined my uncle and my father on a construction site. And while they were on break, I took the opportunity to use the concrete slab where they were framing up a house as a stage, and I began to dance and enjoy myself as an entertainer. And when my uncle saw that, he said, "Stop doing that. We don't do that here." That message was given to me strongly as a young boy and impacted what I understood to be masculinity. And so I didn't dance again until late into my 40s. I didn't explore what masculinity could be till I got out of that community and began to grow and explore other ways of being in college primarily. And so it was formative in just my understanding of myself and the culture that I was in. And I see that my students often are constrained by the cultures that they experienced as a child, and recognize that college and these study abroad experiences can really awaken some new ways of being and new ways of thinking about the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. I really enjoyed hearing that story. As I said, one of the things I like about this activity is it gives us a glimpse into each person's lives that we may not otherwise get. So that I really enjoy this conversation. So thank you for sharing that. Erica, could you introduce yourself, where you're coming from, and then your key message and how it was formative for you?
Excellent. Hi, I'm Erica. I'm the director and head curator for Purdue Galleries. And we will be running our first study abroad in the spring with a trip to the UK over spring break. It's a museum studies study abroad, which I'm not sure that we've really had before. And we'll be traveling to London, Manchester, and Oxford. So when I read this question, I immediately forgot everything that everyone's ever told me. And I think that was a common theme in our group. But I did what I often do in these situations and kind of reframed the question into something that might be helpful to what we're applying it to, which is a study abroad. So my answer to that was actually a running theme between living and working abroad and also survey design, which is part of what I do. And that phrase was, how might someone misinterpret this? And my brother is a professor of statistical psychology. So anytime I run a survey past him and he thinks that something might be somewhat problematic, he comes back and says, well, how might someone misinterpret this? But it's also, you know, as we're taking students abroad, there's definitely an undercurrent of how can we approach this from several angles so that there's less of a chance that we might be misinterpreted. So that was kind of my phrase of the answer.
Thank you for that one. That was an interesting take, and I like the connection you made to study abroad. So thank you for that, Erica. So thank you to everyone who shared in this fishbowl. And at this point, I'm going to invite everyone who's outside the fishbowl. You can come back. You can turn your videos back on. And again, everyone is welcome to jump in at any point during the conversation. But we also have the chat if you're maybe not feeling particularly verbose today. Maybe you don't want to talk. If you want to share thoughts in the chat, you're welcome to do that as well. So I'm going to throw out this general question to everybody. What do these pieces of information say about us culturally? Now, keep in mind on this Voices from the Past, we start with, you know, what's your name? What are some groups, cultural groups that you identify with? And then what is your key message? And of course, we talked about how it's formative. And then also we include our role or our position down there as well. Looking at the handout as a whole, what do these pieces of information say about us culturally? Somebody want to share a thought about this?
Well, I kind of feel like there's this cultural expectation, and please, everybody jump in, that, you know, your influence tends to be most of the people around you, your family. I think everybody pretty much mentioned a family member as being that inspiration for that message.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And you know, who are our role models, you know, that really impacts us, you know, like the question about how was this message formative for you? Those family members that impacted us a lot, professors or, you know, our mentors that we work with. Certainly each of those people have a big impact on our lives in a lot of different ways. So sometimes even these kind of offhand comments that get thrown out that they're probably not thinking, oh, this is particularly impactful. I'm thinking of yours, Andrew, that your uncle was just this is not appropriate, whatever. He probably wasn't thinking about how that impacts you long term. But we do have these people that are very important to us in our lives, and the things they say do form us as we're growing up. A lot of these messages we hear when we're small children, and we tend to hear them again and again, maybe not word for word, but certainly the message that's coming through. Brian, to your point about, you know, this kind of a recurring theme throughout your formative years, and I want to touch on this. You know, there was kind of some themes going through each of the contributions in the conversation. So resilience and grace under pressure, thinking about how we treat others, how we respond to circumstances. Tara's, focus on, we need to focus on the present and what we can do for people now. And then it was almost perfect, Erica, wrapping us up with how can this be interpreted, and thinking about that not only in study abroad, but just our own actions. So I think there's a lot of connectivity here.
Precisely on actions, Dan.
Mhm.
I think yesterday, or the day before, I think the group or the singer is Stink. And in the melody, I don't remember the name of the song, but it talks about fragility, how we are fragile. And I was thinking that one word or one action can bring you down or brings you up. Like you could be positive or you can be negative. And that's why starting from the early years of our life is very important, because the words that we hear from our little environment at the time, and all the way now, because I think we are still fragile, and the action or words can hurt or embrace people. And that's what I think is very important, this IPG course for me, because it's the last thing that you want to do is hurt someone, thinking that you don't understand them. I definitely do not want to do that, and I think we have to think all the time about the types of words or actions that we do towards the students of all the cultures, or the ones we are going to take.
Absolutely. Thank you, Tara, for that thought. So the last thing I want to kind of put in everybody's brain right now is thinking about this activity for your own students. We have a number of different icebreakers out there, getting to know you activities. And unfortunately, we're limited on our time together to really, introduce everyone in the group. And my hope is that as we go through the workshop, we're all going to get a chance to get to know each other a little bit better. But thinking about an activity like this, it's more than just what's your name, what's your department, for our students, what's your name, what's your major, right? What are your hobbies? That only tells us so much, but when we have something specific, like tell me a key message in your life, we can really dig in. I mean, we already had some really great stories about someone's background, about someone's life. And this is a really great way to get in and form some relationships. So I want you to think about activities like this, how they can facilitate some of these conversations around culture very quickly. It's an introduction icebreaker where the students have a chance to get to know each other really quickly, but it also allows them to do a deep dive into cultural differences and cultural backgrounds. So I'm going to go back to sharing my screen here because I do want to go ahead. And I'm trying to be mindful of the time as well. We're already at about T-minus 30 minutes on our session here. This is from the Intercultural Knowledge and Competence Value Rubric from the American Association of Colleges and Universities, or AAC&U for short. So this is just one row from this rubric specifically about cultural self-awareness. And the way they've set it up is having the title of the specific competence here with the highest proficiency level right next to it. So the idea that you're getting all that information right here. So you actually read it from right to left instead of left to right. So at the benchmark level, we have shows minimal awareness of own cultural rules and biases. Then we have at the milestone 2, identifies cultural rules and biases. And then at level 3, recognizes new perspectives about their own cultural rules and biases. So maybe how others see their own cultural, how other people see my culture rules and biases. And then at the capstone, being able to articulate insight into my own cultural rules and biases. So this increasing complexity of cultural self-awareness, right? So this is specific to intercultural competence, not just being aware of actions in general, but very specifically our own cultural rules and biases. So an increasing level. So what are some connections you can make between this and what we've discussed? And maybe it's more direct to say, to ask if anyone felt like they learned something about themselves through this activity.
Winston. So I'm trying to discern some of the examples and stories that was shared. I'm from the Caribbean. I grew up in the Caribbean. I've been in the US for a while. And almost all of the stories are probably stories I've either heard growing up or I could relate to. So I'm trying to understand the cultural component, where it fits in terms of differentiating culturally.
Right, and that's a really great question, Winston. Does anybody have a thought on this? I don't want to be the one who just answers all the questions, but I will, open it up to anyone if they have a response or a thought.
And I guess in response to Janine, I think one of the things that points out is our common humanity, that although we may come from different backgrounds and different places, there's a commonality that we have a basis or baseline to build life upon. And a lot of times the way that our cultures are, they pull out differences, but it just seems like when people were sharing different things, what we could see is that common thread of humanity.
Yes, thank you for that, Janine. So certainly, as Janine succinctly put it, when we start talking about these sorts of things, start talking about culture, we often focus in on the differences and may miss some of the similarities. And an activity like this, certainly there are a lot of similar lived experiences of, hearing messages from family members, role models. So I think everyone kind of universally has an experience like that at some point in their life. So that's definitely a way to pull that out. And I want to point to Brian's sharing, because he specifically kind of bypassed the statement and went to the actual values, right? So a lot of the messages that we heard about, hard work and resilience, those are revealing our values. What is it we value culturally, both internally, but that have been given to us culturally by our family members, right? And we can do the same thing when we go on study abroad. We can meet other people and ask them that question. What's one piece of information that someone has given you that's been formative for you? What's an idiom or a phrase that you've heard growing up? It is a great way to kind of dig into that cultural difference a little bit. As far as sorry, go ahead.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
In the majority of the definitions here says that, for instance, in the number 3, recognizes new perspectives about own cultural rules and biases. With this exercise that we just did, we kind of see different cultures, but how do we see the biases?
That's going to come through these conversations, right? So as we begin to share some of these values with other people, these expressions, we may actually run into some kind of conflict, not argument, but disagreement over certain things, right? So, there are different value perspectives on the kind of pull yourself up by your own bootstraps mentality of, if life gives you lemons, make lemonade, right? Versus some people that, have a different perspective on life of rather than life is what you make it, more of a you're kind of limited or restricted by what resources you have available to you. So you may want to make lemonade, but you don't have sugar or whatever else you might need, for example.
Okay, I was just wondering about the voices from the past exercise.
Right, so that could be one way to do that, is having these conversations and hearing other people's perspectives. A lot of times we do share values cross-culturally, but the way those values are expressed and the degree to which they're expressed differ widely. So that's part of that. And when we talk about recognizing new perspectives, it's that kind of challenging of, well, I understand my own culture, but how does someone else see my culture? So through these conversations, you can get a glimpse into that and hearing from somebody else, their perspective about your culture. Great
One
question.
I want to make a comment. One thing that when I taught the class intercultural communication in Sydney, Australia, I had the students go out and talk to people about how do they see Americans? What's their view of Americans? What's it's like? What kind of background do they have? What kind of biases do they have? And it was amazing, for example, that they thought that every American walked around with a gun strapped to their waist, and that we were very violent, and it was like the Wild West in the Americans. So it was very eye-opening for the students, and it started a conversation that that's not what we're like. Why do you think that's the case? And so in part of that was because guns were outlawed in Australia. And so that was a difference in the culture, but by them starting a conversation, it leads to greater understanding on both parts, how we're viewed, but also how they view us.
Absolutely. And thank you for that, Pam. Yeah, there are quite a few different activities out there and, questions that you can present to facilitate conversations like this. So this is a really great example, Pam. Thank you for sharing that.
Yep.
I also want to acknowledge from Leslie in the chat asking about, maybe you've heard conflicting messages about, interacting interculturally. Should we place emphasis on difference? Should we place emphasis on similarity? How do we determine that? So certainly that will be part of our conversation for those of you who did the IDI. We're going to be talking about that. And both are valuable. What we really want to seek is a balance between the two. We need to give due attention to both similarity and difference. So that's going to be kind of an ongoing conversation as we go through different competencies like cultural self-awareness. One of the things I usually emphasize with cultural self-awareness is as we begin to unpack our own cultural identities, plural, we start to recognize the complexity that we all possess, which is transferable to when we start learning about other cultural groups. We begin to recognize that these individuals in these other groups are equally complex. As we learn about our own complexity, we recognize that complexity in others, which is why cultural self-awareness is so valuable. So in particular to this question about this competence and voices from the past and thinking about the level, does anybody want to venture a guess what level an activity like this might target? 1, 2, 3, or 4?
I may be speaking from personal experience because I'm very much in the beginning of cultural self-awareness. And so this got me out of my comfort zone of what culture am I? Like, what do I identify? So personal experience, I would think 1 or 2, but I honestly think dependent upon the group of people that you are working with, it could hit different levels, but definitely for me, it was 1 or 2.
Yes. Thank you for that, Leslie. And you're right on track there. I think for many people, and even including our students, are coming to us at level 1. And this definitely is an activity that pushes them toward level 2. Could get into level, if you do have some that are in level 2 already, this could help them even go a little bit further into level 3. And like you said, it does depend kind of where you're coming from when you come to this activity. How it can move you. But I do think that beginning to identify your own cultural roles and biases, when we think about, oh, this was a phrase I heard growing up and I knew it was important and I kind of always followed it, right? But now I can start to recognize, oh, this has it's a value statement. And if I unpack it a little bit more, what does that tell me about my own culture? right? So that's really what this activity is getting to. And then beginning to, as you share it with others, then you might be getting into level 3 as well. Okay. And Andrea is sharing with us her thoughts. One of the value propositions from intercultural learning is the component of self-awareness. Discussing difference and similarity creates the opportunity for creating new understanding on a personal level and in a community setting. One of the strengths of intercultural experiences is reflection. Much of the dialogue may not have an immediate impact, but the reflection of the experience will offer valuable learning outcomes. Couldn't have said it better myself, actually. I probably could not have said it that well. So thank you, Andrea, for including that information. Okay, I do want to move along. It's about 6 after 2, and I've got quite a few things to get through here. Thank you, everybody, for a really great conversation around this activity. As I said, this is going to kind of be our routine. You'll have an assignment in that Meet submodule in your accompanying module that goes ahead of the workshop. We'll go into breakout sessions. You'll get a chance to share with each other, and then we'll come. In this one, we didn't do so much reporting back about the small group conversations as we did just sharing our own individual responses. And to address that, it really depends on the activity, the best way to do that, whether it's just having someone share their own versus reporting on their group. So we'll see some different examples of that through other activities in the communities. So let me move on to an overview of IPG. Now, I know I've already gone through an overview with each one of you individually, so I'm going to breeze through this pretty quickly. The first part is just an overview of the different topics that are being covered. So primarily, we're looking at designing and embedding intercultural competence into our programs. So what are those intercultural frameworks and different resources? And on that note, I just briefly want to bring into awareness. Is everyone seeing that? Maybe somebody can give me a thumbs up, the web page. This is the Intercultural Learning Hub. We're going to be coming to this site frequently, especially in workshops 3, 5, and 7, but also in some of the others. The key one that everyone will want to check out is the digital toolbox. So if you've not already gone to hubicl.org and registered an account, please do so soon. It'll make it a little easier to navigate through that when we do it in the workshops. And go ahead and take a look around, and maybe you'll have some questions when we get to workshop 3 or some of the other workshops when we're talking about the Hubicle. And certainly this is also going to be the source for our contribution to the hub, which is one of the requirements for IPG. So I did want to bring that up. And just a note, it's pretty easy to register an account, and we're not going to share your information with people out there, so don't worry about that. And that falls under one of our big resources for intercultural tools and frameworks. We're going to be talking about some of the best practices for both virtual instruction, but also intercultural learning instruction. And I try to model that in these intercultural activities that we start each session with, having some of these leading prompt questions to help us kind of dive deeper into the specific activity and how to unpack things culturally or interculturally. So we're going to be looking at that both through specific explicit instruction, but also hopefully you'll get some of that through my modeling as we do some of these activities together. Additional goals for virtual and in-person IPG. So we're going to, and for those of us who are going through the virtual track, we're going to talk about partnering internationally. But then for everyone, we're going to talk a little bit about data analysis, because that's going to be a part of this, and reporting back on our findings, how we're going to do that. Excuse me, how we're going to do that towards the end. So these are the 10 workshops. Again, everyone's required to do only 6. 1 and 10 are required, so everyone will also do workshop 10. It's just a matter of choosing the ones in between that fit your needs. I think for many of you, I went ahead and recommended the specific workshops, and a lot of you will be doing 3, 5, and 7 again. Those are the steps for backward design that will go into your intercultural learning action plan. For those of you in virtual, you'll likely do 2, 4, and 6, and maybe one additional one as well. So if you do have questions about what your 4th workshop is, you're having a little trouble making up your mind, I'm happy to chat by email or maybe even meet and discuss that a little bit further. There is a decision tree that's included on the web page. That's also here. So this if and scenarios, if that will also help you kind of work your way over here to what are the other workshops you should choose. But these are recommendations. You're not required. And again, as I mentioned in our one-on-ones, you're required to do 6 at the minimum. You'll have access to everything, both in Brightspace and if you want to attend additional workshops as well. They're open to everyone. There is a structure, and I thank you to those of you who've commented about all the hard work I put into setting up Brightspace and refining it over the past couple of years. That is also intended to be a model. Steal anything you like out of Brightspace and out of IPG. I come from a long line of teachers, and one of the idioms that was ingrained in me as regards teaching is beg, borrow, and steal. Don't reinvent the wheel. There's resources out there, and lean on your peers. They have great ideas. So I want to offer that to you as well. Anything you see in Brightspace, even if you want to copy paste it verbatim, I'm not going to go after anyone for plagiarism. It's there to be a help as well. And also with that in mind, some of the, let's say, tone or voice in which I wrote some of IPG may sound like a teacher talking to students, and that's on purpose, not because I'm, consider myself above IPG participants. Rather, again, it's meant to be a model. So if you want to use that with your students, please do borrow that. The structure in there for the asynchronous modules, we've got a warm-up section introducing the topic, then some readings, video to watch, and then we'll have that meet submodule that will give you what you need to prepare for the workshop, including that ICL activity in each one of those. Then we'll have this synchronous live session like we're having right now, workshop 1. After that, you'll need to return to that same module. So everyone here will need to go back to module 1 to the reflect submodule. And that's where you'll respond to the post-workshop reflection questions. And that's also an opportunity for you to send me questions if maybe something didn't get answered here. And then finally, I also include a lot more resources for that specific topic. So feel free to check those out and use them as they might be useful for you in your various programs. So talking about backward design and as it relates to our action plan, these are the 3 elements that we're going to use in developing our backward design, our intercultural learning action plan for our programs, both for our actual programs where we're working with our students that you're here for, the reason you're here, but also for those of you who are doing a small pilot version this fall. This is the basic structure. You're going to start with learning outcomes, and once you've selected those, you'll use those learning outcomes to inform what assessment tools you're going to be using, how you're going to assess those learning outcomes. And then finally from that, then you will get to the actual activities that you're going to use with your students that exercise whatever that competency is or the learning outcome you've chosen. So workshops 3, 5, and 7 are going to go over this in detail. It is often the assumption that people who are going in the virtual track have maybe already done backward design or done a past version of IPG, so may already be familiar with this. But again, you all have access to these resources in 3, 5, and 7 as well, and those conversations. So these are the main components of your intercultural learning action plan that you'll need to submit and get approved. I think for pretty much everyone, and I do want to pull up my spreadsheet here just to make sure, we've already talked about what I've recommended for your assessment tool test drive or trial. I think the vast majority of you are doing the IDI, and there's a few of you who are doing the ASK2 or the ASK2 Plus. And then I don't think I have anyone else who's opted to do the BEVI or the IES, and there's a number of different assessments. But if at any point you come across an assessment that you're curious about, please feel free to reach out to me and I'll assist you and see if we can get you a test drive for those as well, especially if it's something you really think you might want to use with your students. The nice thing about being an IPG, for any of those assessments that have a cost associated with them, like the IDI, we're going to cover that cost for you. So take advantage of that. And again, after you take that assessment, just as your students would, after you take it, you're going to notify me you've completed, and then give me some times to choose from so that I can look and try to look at my schedule, because I do want to meet with each one of you to do an individual debrief. Now, a tool like the IDI requires that individual debrief to get results, but not all assessments do require that. But certainly we need to have a debrief, not only to debrief your results, but also have a conversation about, could you use this in your program, or will you use this, or do we need to find something else, or how could it be beneficial or not? Then when we talk about program completion, there's the 6 workshops and the 6 accompanying modules that have these assignments and tasks in them. So each module is going to have some discussion boards. It's probably also going to have a handout or worksheet. And if you haven't used Brightspace this way before, from the learner's perspective, hopefully this is also advantageous to you to get that perspective of working in Brightspace to see what your students see. I do want to point you to the grades tab up at the top in Brightspace. There's a series of tabs that you can click on. If you go to grades, you should see all of the tasks that are listed there, and that can help you keep track of, did I do all the things in each module, make sure that I've submitted everything. But certainly when we get to the end of the training, if you're missing something, I'll let you know. As I mentioned, we've got the Hubical tool contribution. I'm asking everyone to do a review of a tool from the Hub. This may or may not be one that you end up using in your actual program, but it's certainly one that you want to at least do with a group of students so that you have something to review, something to comment back on. And again, this doesn't have to be an activity. It could be an assessment. It could also be a reflection tool. There's a number of different resources that we'll dig into through this series. Everyone's going to submit an action plan. And again, for those of you who are doing the small pilot, you're going to be doing that twice. And the same with the data analysis report, the intercultural program leader completion survey. So you'll be filling that out both for your study and then after your actual program is completed. Completion goals. So as far as wrapping up IPG, for those of you who are doing fall programs, the rule has always been within 10 days of returning and your student submitting their final work, the expectation is within about 10 days, you'll be submitting your completion report. You'll have analyzed your data and reported back. There's some leeway there, but we're looking for end of December, but no later than mid-January. And that's also what we're shooting for with everyone else who's doing these small pilot studies as well. So completion by winter break, but if we need to go into January, we can. And again, with any of this at any time, feel free to send me a message. We can have a chat about these and clarify things further if need be. Data analysis, when we get towards the end, especially in workshop 10, we're going to be talking about qualitative versus quantitative analysis using mixed methods. So using both qualitative and quantitative, and then how we're going to report on that. What is it we're actually looking for in that completion survey? And how you're using that information as well. Assessment for your program, the assessments that you're using in your program being used for evaluation of your program and also revision of future iterations. Because ultimately, the whole point of doing an action plan, collecting data and reporting back on it is meant to be beneficial for you to kind of tell you, okay, what do I need to do next year to make this better for my students, to improve growth outcomes in those learning outcomes for my students. So we'll be talking about that as well. Briefly, some information about logistics, and this is really just a point to things that maybe you haven't thought of or haven't started thinking about yet, just because you're overwhelmed with everything else. But just to keep kind of in your mind, these are the types of things you'll need to be thinking about. I think most people are aware of, with in-person study abroad, those housing, transportation, meals, site visits, those types of logistics, but also the budgeting that goes along with it, and communicating that with the Office of Study Abroad. But of course, in IPG, we're going to be addressing those cultural learning logistical things. So how are we going to deliver that cultural learning component and intercultural competence? And then tying that into the academic side as well, because we want really a seamless connection between the intercultural competence and your specific discipline, the focus of your study abroad. As regards some of the logistics, thinking about your program design, are you using a private company that's providing some structure to your study abroad, working with other universities or other colleagues at peer institutions? What is the budget and fee structure? Will you need to submit a rate request to the Office of Study Abroad to pass on some of those fees and costs to the students as part of registering for your program? There are deadlines for those who are doing a winter program. October 15th is the deadline for a rate request. For fall, it was back in May 15th. If you're doing a spring break, it's also October 15th. And if you're doing a summer program, it's December 15th. And if you're doing a virtual program, you may or may not need a rate request. So again, reaching out to the Office of Study Abroad would be a wise thing to do, to have a conversation about that. Again, if you have a private company that's providing instruction to your students, for example, that may have a cost associated with it. Do you need to submit a rate request to structure that so that those are paid for as well? Or is your department putting up funds to cover those types of costs? There's also a recruitment time frame. Usually you want to get most of your recruitment done before rate requests are due. And you will need to have full participant list 75 to 90 days prior to your program. And of course, you know, historically programs get canceled if we don't have enough enrollment. So that's something to be considering. And then of course, if you're doing a virtual program, that depends on the program design and if your host institution has any deadlines as well. All study abroad programs should be offering some form of departmental credit, but there are also backup contingencies, and also thinking about virtual exchange. Would Purdue students be enrolling at a peer institution for a course? Would there be transfer credits? Those are things that have to be considered as well. And then of course, liabilities. So do you have to make payments to vendors? Do they offer refunds up to a certain deadline? All of those things, cancellation terms, as well as financial aid considerations are things that need to be considered. And for all of you who are doing IPG, you're now eligible to also apply for the SAIL grant. And I believe the SAIL grant deadline, this is for in-person study abroad programs, the SAIL grant deadline is September 9th. So you should also be aware of that. I also just posted an announcement in Brightspace about the Office of Experiential Education is offering grants. And certainly anyone who's doing a study abroad or a virtual exchange, you're doing experiential education. So take a look at those grants as well. That information is up on Brightspace. Okay. Plowing through this stuff really fast, so I appreciate everybody's patience. We're almost there at the end. So wrap up and discussion. As I mentioned, after this workshop ends, you're going to want to go back to module 1 and go into the reflection submodule and respond to that discussion board. And I recognize, I know everybody, this is the busiest time of year that we're all trying to go through this training. So some of you haven't had a chance to really dig into module 1 yet. That's okay. There's still plenty of time to get that stuff turned in, submitting to those discussion boards. And again, I really want to encourage you all to interact with one another, ask each other questions about your programs or about their comments that they posted in the discussion board as well. And also, please go explore those resources there in Brightspace. Hopefully, I've included enough that are going to be very useful. As well, the other thing I want to mention, thank you, Andrew, for the gentle nudge that I'm also going to pass on to everyone else. For those of you who are doing virtual programs, so if you're in the VAIL or COIL grant programs, you're going to be meeting with Andrea Thomas very soon. She's my newest colleague who's taking over VAIL and COIL administration. If you're doing a virtual exchange, you're going to want to meet with Andrea, and we'll be discussing that further and setting up appointments, probably where the 3 of us will sit together and have a conversation, but certainly you and Andrea will get to work one-on-one as well this semester. Once you've wrapped up module 1, go on to the next module, whether for some of you that's going to be module 2, which we're meeting on Thursday, or module 3, which will be next Tuesday. Please do check out the announcements. I will periodically be adding in new information, whether it's about, hey, the PowerPoint's now available, or the recording. I may from time to time make that announcement, especially if it's one that I'm behind on getting posted. But also, other grant opportunities that come up. I'll try to share those as well. I will also be sharing information. We have a Silmar writing group for those of you who are already considering trying to get published about your study abroad, about using intercultural competence. We have a writing group that supports that. We also have other programs. We have the portable intercultural modules. We have worldview workshops. There's a number of different opportunities I'll be sharing through announcements. And finally, last but not least, I do want to introduce my colleague, Andrea. If your video is not on, could you go ahead and turn it on and say hello to everyone and briefly introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. Really great to be here with you. And thanks, Dan, for that intro and sharing the information about faculty support for Vail and Coyle. I'm grateful to join the Silmar team, and we're all here as resources for you. I come from the outer world with knowledge on virtual exchange, having worked with the American Council on Education and the SUNY Coyle Center. So if you do have some questions, I'm certain that I can help you, and you have tons of resources in Silmar, as you can see from this workshop today. So really great to be here with all of you.
Thank you, Andrea. So it's at this point where I look at the clock and I think, wow, I actually made it. I actually got everything in. So thank you, everybody. Really wonderful conversation today in our intercultural activity. Thank you all for sharing your thoughts and your experiences. I look forward to future conversations, really diving into some more topics and sharing ideas. So that's what we're all here for, and giving you guys a chance to share with one another as well. So that's it for me. That's it for workshop 1. Thank you all very much. I'll stick around a little bit after in case anybody has any questions. But other than that, have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank
you.
you.
Thanks, this was really great.
Thank you.
This is for Daniel.
Yes.
Okay. It's a little off topic, but you emailed me with attachment. It was a PDF attachment with our homework.
Yeah.
Voices from the past.
Yeah. Do we want to
Did you
make
get my email about that?
I did. I saw that I got your PDF and I was able to open it. And I saw all your answers, so I'm not sure what the issue was. I do want to get into.
I'm not sure what's exactly wrong with the right space, but I was going to make sure that you got it and there was no issues.
Yeah, I definitely got it, and I can check you off on that. I do want to get into Brightspace and take a look and see, because sometimes it can just be a glitch where it's not showing up on your end, but it is on mine. I suspect that's not the case, but I do want to double check it real quick. If you don't mind hanging on just a second. Let me close this out. I do have Brightspace open, so it shouldn't take me more than a second to get in there. Okay, let's see. Oh, you got the first one up here. Okay. Just pull it open, and actually I'll go ahead and share my screen so you can see what I'm looking at. Okay, so this is my submission page. And let's see what the first one is. Yep, it's there.
All right, so strange. Then I'll go into my BS Brightspace page and I can't see the reaction. So
okay,
I'm not sure. I was making sure that you can get it.
It could be a browser issue.
All right, that's fine. I'll just make sure all's good on your end. All right, so now it's nice to have this first meeting. So now I know what to expect in the coming months.
Okay.
Because yeah, like you said, it is a busy month, and we're trying to also learn myself, like all the different cultures and all the intersectionalities, and understand different cultural differences myself. So yeah, always learning myself as well. And I hope everything works out in the coming months.
Thanks, great. I did have one, I just want to verify, you're going to be doing 3, 5, and 7, is that correct? Yes, okay.
Yep.
Okay,
Yeah.
so those I'm definitely going to make sure that I get you. And Mikey, is it best to send you the PowerPoints directly? Should I also be sharing them directly with Anna or Dustin, or will you share them? Whatever your preference is.
Yeah, you go ahead and
Oh,
Oh, Dustin, it muted on you.
mute myself. Yeah, you can send me the PowerPoint, and then I'll share it with the interpreters as well.
okay, great. That works out. And I'll try to get you 3 ahead, more than the day of. I'll try to get you a week ahead. So I'm going to try and work on those today and get them to you, so you have plenty of time with them.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, great.
Yeah, so far the interpreters not seen the interpreter or getting the PowerPoints, but they seem to be working fine. Yep. Yeah, we're okay.
Okay. And at the very least, I'm also going to have the PowerPoints added to Brightspace as well. So after the fact as well. But I'll email them to you. Okay. All right. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Bye.